Okay, this morning I'm going to show you how to blend using different colours of thread. So I'm going to show a blend with 3 colours of thread, and I've just drawn this little area that I'm going to fill. And I'm just going to draw some lines. So I'm going to go from yellow to orange to this kind of peachy pink. So that's the first thing you'll want to do. You'll want to know what areas are going to be what colour. And you're going to want to get your threads sorted. Now if you're working from one of my designs or a kit or pattern that you've purchased, then obviously you'll already have those colours, which is great because you're going to want to have the right colours for a gradient, because if you have the wrong colours, then it doesn't matter what you do, you're always going to see the blend. And you can look at my blog post, one of my recent blog posts, for more details on that. So what you're going to want to do first is, I always start from the bottom of whatever I'm doing, but it doesn't really matter. So you're going to want to start off at the edge. Now I tend to do a sort of silk stitch, hitting the edge each time, but the other edge I keep nice and jagged, because that's how you're going to blend your colours in later, and that is the start of long and short stitch, is this jagged edge, which you want to maintain throughout the whole of your stitching. So now I've got the first colour in, I'm going to show you how to add other rows. I sped that bit up because it took quite a while, and also how to blend. So I've got my second colour ready. Now the first thing you'll notice is that this blue line that I drew, the stitches both overlap it and don't quite reach it, and that's done very deliberately, because that means that when I blend, the stitches are going to overlap like that, as opposed to having a boundary like that, which means that the blend is going to be much smoother. So to add more rows, as it were, to your long and short stitch, I'm going to start at the edge here, and you're just going to keep doing that sort of backwards silk stitch action, but you're going to want to place it down into your existing stitching, and I like to run my needle through it sometimes to put it between the existing stitches, as opposed to puncturing that thread, because that can lead to more marks like this in the overall piece. You can also see that my stitches are quite long and they're actually going into this third section here. That's absolutely fine, that's just because this orange section is very small at the edge, and actually it's going to be barely noticeable except tonally, so don't worry about that. Make sure that you're maintaining the jagged edge at the top of your piece, and just carry on like that, blending as you go. And you can see that my orange stitching is coming quite far down into the yellow section, and the yellow stitching is still visible quite far into the orange section, and that is what you want. And now coming to add in this third colour, I'm going to do that in exactly the same way as I did with the second one, dragging my needle down into the previous stitching and making sure that I keep a jagged edge. Now it obviously depends on the scale that you are working with and how many strands. I'm only using one here, what you're going to be doing as you stitch, but I like to use one strand to get a smoother blend, and the longer you can keep your stitches, depending on the design, the smoother that blend will also end up. And as you hit the edges up at the top, just simply make sure that any stitches hitting that edge hit it in the same way as they did at the bottom, almost like silk stitch on one side, and that they also blend in with the rest of your stitching on the other. And if you do have any lumps and bumps in your border when you've removed the pen marks, then you can always go back and add more stitches to cover up any bits that are perhaps missing. You may also, which I tend to do at the edge, change the direction you're stitching in so that you can really place your needle right on the edge and you can see what you're doing a bit better. You don't have to, you can continue stitching in the same direction, but one of the things that is great about long and short stitch is that it doesn't matter which direction you bring your needle up and put your thread down in, it will still turn out exactly the same. So when you finish stitching, you might want to go back in with each colour and blend it in along the blending line again. That might be if you've got a piece where actually you can see the edge of the stitching quite clearly and the boundary between them, or if you've got quite a big jump in colours, you may just want to go back and blend it in even further. And the way to do that is simply to add some more stitches along that line that go right across the boundaries quite far in each colour, and just help to soften the change. Another thing that helps when you are checking, I don't know if it's just me that can do this, but I can sort of unfocus my eyes and look at the piece, and if I can see the boundary between the colours when I've done that, then I know that I haven't blended it properly. If I can't and they all just merge into each other, then I know that I've done my job properly and that they are looking nice and smooth and blended. But a way that you could do that, if you can't do that, if that's just me, if you hold it further away and then see if you can still see where you've got the boundary between the two or three sections, the colours, because the idea is that you don't want to be able to see where that line was, you just want to see a gradual change in colour. And don't worry if you're stitching one of my patterns or another pattern and the actual line where it fades is slightly different to the original line you drew on your drawing. That's not going to be a big problem. You can always edit it by just bringing one colour slightly further forward, but you probably don't need to, because as long as you've got a smooth blend, it doesn't matter if you're a few millimetres off. Another thing you can do is look at the back, and that should be nice and thick. You shouldn't see many holes where you haven't stitched. So there you go, that was the first part of a thread painting series of tutorials that I'm releasing, and this was starting off your stitching and blending your colours.